Over the past decade, we have seen several countries rise economically. Both developed and developing nations have posted astounding growth, and some have scaled up to levels never seen before. Numerous developing countries have been given the title of the next economic powerhouse of the world, and the very same countries that we now call strong economic contenders were once doubted, and probably, if we looked back then, we would have never even imagined that some of these countries would become where they are today. Yet amongst the very countries that have posted growth after growth, there too lies one unique country that is slated to rival that of most developed nations in due time. Yes, as the time of this video suggests, it is Vietnam, a rising superstar in the region of Southeast Asia. Now, you may be wondering, Vietnam? How can such a nation that was once war-torn and currently aligned with numerous geographic issues and arguably only transitioned into a market-based economy from a socialist-based economy in just a few decades, become the contender for economic titles? Well, amongst all of the developing world today, there is no other country such as Vietnam that has been exceeding in terms of GDP growth, export-oriented manufacturing, and foreign direct investments. As of 2021, Vietnam's GDP has reached over 366 billion US, which is a huge increase from 2010. At a time when it posted only 147.2 billion US dollars in GDP. That is more than double in a decade or so. But that is not the highlight of the country's growth. The highlight lies in the per capita, simply because it has surpassed a number of neighboring countries that it had been lagging for decades. If we go back about a decade ago, Vietnam's GDP per capita was just 2,028 US dollars in 2010, which made it the lowest compared to the Big Five of Southeast Asia. As of 2021, Vietnam has now surpassed the Philippines and is almost inching closer to Indonesia. And that's not all there is to it. Vietnam, as of the end of 2022, has also made big economic breakthroughs. First, it ended the year with a GDP growth of 8.02%, the fastest since 1997. Secondly, total exports ballooned to a whopping $371.8 billion, which also makes Vietnam one of the largest developing countries in terms of exports. And for actual comparison, Vietnam is the second largest country in terms of exports in Southeast Asia, just behind Singapore. This is an impressive feat considering Southeast Asia is a very massive destination for foreign outsourcing activities. Finally, the foreign direct investment received in 2022 was also substantial at $22.4 billion. In all simplistic explanations, Vietnam has become so important to the global economy in just a few years. If you would ask someone around the early 2000s if Vietnam would ever become as rich as its neighboring countries or even have economic growth outpacing them, they would probably laugh at you. But today, the rising star has exceeded expectations. And all of these are even just historical data. Looking forward to the future, a lot of expectations are now targeted towards Vietnam, as analysts and institutions have cited that the next economic powerhouse could be Vietnam. Most of you, however, would be wondering how? How did Vietnam become a rising superstar? Did its government do something different from the usual frameworks? Or has there been a handful of entrepreneurs pushing the economy forward? Well, there are many causes for their rise. We could attribute these back again to the usual statements we did earlier: exports, foreign investments, and the transition from an agriculture-based economy to an industry and service-based economy. Let us start with exports. Vietnam's export is robust. As the largest in Southeast Asia, it simply means that they are selling so many of their products overseas. Data from the United Nations Comtrade shows that Vietnam's largest exports by category are electronics, which account for 39% of its total exports, followed by machinery and then apparel and footwear. These merchandise exports can be traced back to foreign investments. How? Because a number of these exports are connected to companies like Samsung. Yes, Samsung, the South Korean conglomerate and electronic brand, holds a huge presence in Vietnam, and it is due to the presence of Samsung that Vietnam has become a superstar in the electronics industry. According to a report published by VN Express, which quoted the Samsung Electronics president and deputy prime minister of Vietnam, where they had talked about how big of a presence Samsung is in Vietnam. As of the end of 2022, Vietnam's total exports from Samsung products amounted to a whopping $65 billion. In case you've forgotten, Vietnam's total exports were $371 billion. For one single company to account for this much in Vietnam's total exports would truly make Samsung a huge part of the Vietnamese economy. And you may be wondering, how did this happen? Well, for the most part, Vietnam produces over half of the total Samsung smartphones there are. And as most people know, Samsung is the second largest smartphone brand in the entire world, just behind Apple. However, if we only take a look at the data around inexpensive smartphone devices, we will see how Vietnam is not only a producer that outpaces Apple in this category, but they have become an important part of producing low-cost smartphones for developing countries. And to the figures, there are millions of smartphone products every year. Furthermore, Samsung has a total foreign investment made in Vietnam of over $18 billion, with plans to extend it to $20 billion. Likewise, Samsung is not alone when it comes to foreign investments. There are a number of companies globally that have invested billions of dollars in the Vietnamese economy, and they are all pushing the country's exports to record highs every possible year. Aside from foreign investments and exports, the economy has also transitioned from traditional-based economies to more modern-based economies. The government has introduced a variety of economic reforms. For instance, they transformed the largest companies, which were previously state-owned enterprises, into private companies. In other words, they were implementing reforms to help become a more market-oriented system. This helped push investments both domestically and even internationally. By emphasizing a more market-oriented system, Vietnam was also able to improve competitiveness within its local borders, which increased productivity and helped push growth. Moreover, Vietnam has pushed for educational and training investments, which developed the entire human capital system of the country. There is a reason why these foreign firms have been investing billions of dollars in Vietnam, simply because they have taken a good look at the country's human capital system and found that they are suitable for production and manufacturing. Finally, the improvement of both infrastructures and export promotion further helped Vietnam's economy, and a larger push and emphasis from the government on what matters. They understood that the world does not need a lot of agriculture and commodity-based products, but what they needed was electronics, machines, and so on. Even if we take a look at some of the words from official institutions such as the Korean Economic Institute of America, which published an article in 2021 citing how important Vietnam has become to South Korea, they have said that the biggest factor that led numerous South Korean companies to invest in Vietnam is because of its political stability. The report stated that Vietnam continues to remain open to foreign investments with the support of its legal system, which makes it stand out amongst the entire region. Now, if we add all of these, along with the country's low wages and costs and strong political stability, it then made sense for Vietnam to quickly grasp the economy. As of the time of writing, Vietnam still has a fairly decent wage compared to other countries, making them a good chance for foreign investments. It is estimated by Statista Research Department in 2018 that the average salary in Vietnam is just $2.73 per hour, compared to China, which has $5.51 per hour, and Mexico at $4.45 per hour. Furthermore, the electricity cost in Vietnam is even amazingly low. According to global petrol prices, Vietnam has an average electricity price for business of just 0.076 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas China has over 0.093 cents per kilowatt hour. Operational costs are everything to foreign investors and even to domestic entrepreneurs. However, what we have stated so far is not even all of the reasons why Vietnam has become a rising superstar. There are a number of other causes out there. We have yet to cite the rising businesses in Vietnam, which are helping stage the country to international markets. We have yet to cite how Vietnam amazingly reduced poverty to single-digit figures, or how the country pushed unemployment to levels never seen before. Several causes, in other words. But anyway, what do you think? Will Vietnam continue to outstage its neighboring countries? If so, why? Thanks for watching.